Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm Daniel Roman here for winteriscoming.net. Today I'm joined by Andrea Stewart, the author of the epic fantasy series The Drowning Empire, which is out from Orbit Books. All three books in the trilogy are out now, and it is one of the just most awesome epic fantasy stories I've read in recent memory. So, Andrea, thank you so much for taking time to chat about it today. I'm so excited to talk to you about it.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Of course. So as of this recording, The Bone Shard War, Book 3, is officially out. So I kind of have to start with probably a cheesy question, probably that I'm sure you have gotten a few times in the past week or two. How does it feel to have the trilogy finished?
It's funny because I just finished writing a whole blog post about it and how it feels kind of surreal and not really like it's happening to me at this moment in time, because it feels as though it's happened already, because I finished the book. I've left these characters behind and quite some time ago. And so having the book come out, it is different. It's strange. And it's exciting to know that people are going to be actually reading the end of it, because it doesn't quite feel real to me until other people have read it.
Yeah, that's pretty understandable, I think. So I feel like people always find this a little curious. You talk about, so I have read the blog post, which was really wonderful, by the way. Just this idea of, yeah. So as a writer, you're kind of like a little bit in the past and the future, kind of in the way that you're handling this, because your work on the book was done so long ago. So I'm just curious, like, when did you actually like put the finishing touches on the book for yourself? Because you've been deep in another project already.
I'm like trying to remember. I know I did proofs when my daughter was fairly young. And then I think I handed in edits a little bit before she was born. She is 11 months old now. So it's been, I know it's been a while. It's been quite some time. Yeah. So I don't know if I would consider the proofs the finishing touches, because it's basically just kind of correcting any small errors.
Yeah.
So I would say probably it's been almost a year. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's always so fascinating with books and when they come out, because there's this illusion that it hits the shelf and you must have clearly just stopped writing it last week now that it's out.
Right.
But that's just not even remotely how it works. I love that you're gauging that in age of your child, though. That's a pretty cool way to keep track.
I mean, it feels like the way that I have been keeping track, because I got my book deal and then shortly after that found out that I was pregnant with my first child. So it's been kind of this, so it's been this thing where I have had a child and then had a book come out around the same time, and then, wrote another book. So it's just been this kind of weird thing where I've entered parenthood and also being a professional author around the same time.
Yeah, probably. I'm sure that's been just a little bit to deal with all of those changes all at once.
Yes. Yes, it's tough.
So I'm going to hop around, and I had like some questions laid out, but since we're talking about parenting, I want to skip to one that I had about that. So, staying relatively spoiler free here, there is a particular couple of characters who are parents in this book. And I thought about that. I thought about, knowing that you were raising kids at the same time you were writing this. There were a lot of things I imagine for those characters that would resonate with parents in the ways that you wrote specifically the willfulness of their kid. And I'm just curious, were there any like specific things that leaked into the manuscript where it was either parenting lessons or your kid did something one day and you were like, oh, that goes in the book?
Well, I mean, a lot of it was based off of raising my ex-stepson, actually. So I came into his life when he was 10. So I was thinking a lot about that and how, it's kind of difficult to step into a parental role with an already like
Yeah.
here and formed child. And so some of the frustration, but also the wonderful kind of moments kind of crept in there as well.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, it was just a resoundingly positive part of the book. I loved that particular element. As someone who does have a step parent, I could definitely see that. Okay, so backing up a little bit, I am so curious. You had an interesting writing process for this book in particular. Last time we spoke, you it was right around the time of the Bone Shard Emperor's release. That's book two.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of talked about how you had book ones down to like pretty much a science at that point when you sold the Bone Shard Daughter. And then there were a lot of lessons that you learned writing book two. Um, book three, in the author's note, you talk a little bit about how you actually had to scrap, I think it's like an entire draft of this book. Is that right?
Yeah, it was about an entire draft. Yeah.
So like what was
Yeah.
that process like? That sounds like it must have been a huge process for you. I'm so curious.
Well, I think that, yeah, I thought that I had the whole process down after writing The Bone Shard Daughter, but I had never written a book two and a book three. I'd written a lot of book one. So kind of figuring out the structure of a trilogy and how I was going to end it. And also, unfortunately, I feel like I tend to make some of the same errors that I think that I already know I'm not going to make.
Yeah, as
Because
humans
I was
do.
talking, I know it's terrible, right? I was talking to my friends about it, and one of my friends was pointing out, oh, you've brought in this new character when really you should have this other character here fulfilling this role,
Oh
that
man.
this character that already exists. And I was just like, oh man, like that's something I know, right? That's something I
Yeah.
already know how to do to keep things simplified, and yet I let it get away from me. So yeah, there was that. There's also, I think, just trying to figure things out through the process of drafting,
Mhm.
which unfortunately seems to be part of the way that I work.
Yeah.
So I'll be figuring things out while I'm drafting, and sometimes it becomes apparent to me that I'm so far off the course that I need to just start over. Fortunately, when I do start over, it tends to feel more correct and it goes a lot smoother. And also, fortunately, I tend to write quite quickly, so I can afford to just scrap a bunch of words. But I do have to say it is definitely painful. I don't think that there's anything that is easy about that.
Yeah. I could totally imagine because that is quite a lot of work that you obviously put in, and ultimately it clearly is worth it because the Bone Shard War is excellent. So it
Oh, I'm
arrived
so
at,
glad you think so.
yeah, I mean I loved it. So it definitely seems like it arrived at the version that it wanted to be. But I can't imagine that was easy to go back to the beginning and redo it. So let me ask you, were there any particular signs for you that when you did go back to do that draft again, that it had arrived, or like what made that feel different? Was there anything specific?
Oh, yeah. Specifically, I felt that the characters and their actions were matching up more with who they were as people. I
Yeah.
think that the biggest thing that tips me off to a draft not being right is that the way the characters are behaving feels like it's serving the plot rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
Where
Totally.
I'm thinking, well, the characters need to go here and they need to do this because this is how the plot works, and
Yeah.
it doesn't seem to fit with who they are as people. So I have to go back and replot things to make sure that it lines up with who they are and who they are becoming as far as the character development goes.
Yeah. I can't remember. Are you an outliner?
I am.
Okay.
I know it sounds like I'm not.
Well, I feel like that's a
But I
common
am.
outliner thing to fall into, is the characters moving. So that's really cool that ended up being one of the signals that everything was working. I don't know how to ask this. If this is too spoilery, we can cut it. But
Okay.
I was really
Okay.
curious with that particular, just knowing your process for this book. So there is a little bit of a time jump at the start of this book.
Hmm.
Did you actually write any of the material during the time jump period? Like, was that a factor in kind of some of the
I
stuff?
did. Yeah. So I had written material before the time jump,
Okay.
and I was realizing that it wasn't the best place to start off. So I had basically started writing from where the Bone Shard Emperor had left off,
Yeah.
but I felt like structurally it just wasn't going to work. So, uh, especially given what some of the characters have been going through and have been through in that 2 year time jump, I felt like they had to be at a point where they had experienced these things for a length of time
Yeah, that makes sense.
before. Yeah. Yeah.
Totally
So,
makes sense.
yeah, there's definitely material from that period of time that I just tossed. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So it's there on my hard drive, right? I can never really throw it away.
It makes such a difference though. So reading that, and again, I'm not going to spoil anything, but it didn't feel like, something you had thought of. Like it felt like you knew the events intimately, and sometimes that comes through. So
Mm-hmm.
I will just say for my part as a reader, it kind of felt like having a bucket of cold water dumped on my head just a bit to see like where the starting point was so interesting to me. So what helped you know that where you started it was the right place to start it?
Oh gosh.
We're going with the
Well,
small
I think
questions.
yeah, I think that the way that I had to set things up, I knew that we had to have the characters be thrust into basically their lowest point very quickly,
Gotcha.
because they spend a lot of time having to try to dig themselves out from that point,
Yeah.
and whether that they have to figure out whether or not that works or if they have to change tactics. So yeah, I think how do I best explain that? Yeah, I mean for the character arcs that I had planned for this last book, that's kind of where things had to start off, where things have been bad for a while, but they are just starting to get worse. And that's kind of that tipping point.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It's one of those things where it's like, I'm sorry, characters, but it worked so well.
Oh, I'm so glad. I know
Yeah.
it's jarring for people, and I wish that I had asked to put some kind of summary in the beginning, but live and learn. It's done. So,
Well, so just to be clear, when I said the bucket of cold water thing, I didn't mean that it was jarring at all. Just a feeling of, oh my God, I didn't think it was going to start like this, which is wonderful in my opinion when you start a book and you can be surprised from like the opening pages. So I give you immense kudos for figuring out that spot as where to start it because I really do think it made it a better book.
oh, I'm so glad it worked for you.
Yeah. So, okay. So, lightening it up just a little bit, I have to ask you about animal companions, which is another one I'm sure you're getting asked about a lot because obviously Mephi, who is the animal companion kind of poster child for your series, has an enormous fan base. So, I think for a lot of people who have pets, they've maybe those mannerisms of Mephi and the other. I don't want to talk too much about exactly what they are. They're like otter-like creatures, but a lot of those mannerisms I think really rang true. So I, again, knowing you are a pet person, I'm curious if there were any specific things from your own pet parenting life that helped inform creating those characters.
Oh yeah. Well, so I had a cat before that I based some of his mannerisms on, and now I have another cat that's very similar. But just that kind of overwhelming enthusiasm for everything, even if it's getting into trouble,
Yeah.
like that, I definitely drew on my own experiences because my previous cat, he would steal food from my guests and He would unroll the toilet paper and drag it down the hall.
Oh,
Just
nice.
just a lot of little silly things that he would get into, but also in addition to being enthusiastically mischievous, he was just enthusiastically affectionate. And I think that's a lot of
Aw,
how I think of Meffy, where, he's just got this joy for life and he just wants everything to be okay. And he wants this person to be okay.
yeah,
And that doesn't mean that he's going to be doing everything that Jovis wants him to. But,
of course.
overall, they just have this like really close and loving bond.
Yeah, the bond, I mean, that is, I don't want to say at the center of your books, but it's a large part of it, that bond between these animal creatures and their people. And yeah, that definitely came through. Thinking about one scene in particular early on where Meffy jams his cold nose into Jovis's eye, which is totally this just one of those things you read it and it's like, yep, anyone who's owned a cat is going to know exactly what that's like.
Yeah. Especially when you're trying to sleep and they're just all up in your face. Yeah.
Yep. So are there any things to writing animal companions, or I kind of want to say like common pitfalls or advice you would give people who want to write really good animal companions?
I think that part of it would be consistency, like decide straight up front how smart you want your animal companion to be, what kind of behaviors and mannerisms they have. Is there an animal that you're basing them off of?
Yeah.
Also, I think one thing that happens a lot of the times is that the animal companion gets a little lost. So make sure that they're integral to your plot so that, your reader's not thinking, well, I know that they had a dog, but what happened to the dog? They're climbing a ladder now, right? How'd they get up there with their dog? Because, I mean, as a reader, I'm like always worried and thinking about the animals involved, right?
Yeah, of course. Oh man, you really took that one to heart. Just thinking about the series and how integral the animal companions are. Got it. Yeah, that's a good one. So we've talked a little bit about how the book changed throughout like the process of you writing it, all that sort of stuff. Again, keeping things kind of spoiler free, were there any specific scenes you had been looking forward to writing for a long time, or had been, were benchmark scenes for you that you knew you always wanted to get to?
Oh yeah, I definitely the big battle scenes. I always think about those. I always look forward to writing those. I know some authors are not really a fan, but to me, that's where everything comes to a head, not just physically, but emotionally, where the characters are really reckoning with their decisions and who they want to be as people. Definitely, I looked forward to writing the ending scenes. I had in my head for a while what I wanted that to look like and where everybody ended up, and that those hints of what might be to come for them in their lives. Any like very emotional scene, I always look forward to writing those. I always think about those. But definitely those little turning points. Oh, and also like just like the banter, like the parts where people, where I see these characters that I really, really love kind of maybe butting heads on something and, giving each other like shit for something. So I just really enjoy that kind of stuff as well.
I feel like there was a lot of potential for that with some of the pairings you had in book 3. So that's pretty cool. So I'm going to ask about one specific character that I'm curious about, because I haven't really seen you talk about this one over much. And her journey was really interesting because, again, just talking about things being unpredictable, I had no idea what you were going to do with this character in this book. And that is Sand, we'll say, whichever, however we want to refer to this character. What was the genesis like for you realizing you wanted to do that character, and kind of where you wanted to take them? Because they are kind of in a pretty difficult, place for most of the series. So yeah, I was just wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to give too many spoilers.
Totally.
So, yeah, I mean, for me, she comes from a very difficult spot, and she is comes from a difficult situation. And I feel like, when you look at the villains of the stories, a lot of the times, yeah, there are reasons that they are the way that they are, and we can sympathize and empathize with that. At the same time, it's a reason, it's not an excuse.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
So that's like one of the things that I wanted to kind of address throughout the series is that, yeah, there are reasons that she is the way that she is. And yes, she's been done some terrible wrong, but it's not an excuse for the way that she's behaved or the things that she's done. And there are, I think, always ways to, I think like everybody's redeemable, right?
Yeah.
I do think that we want to allow people the chance to change and grow. However, that doesn't excuse or take away the pain and the destruction that they may have caused when they were doing bad things. And I wrestle with that a lot myself when I think about people that have done terrible things and you see that they've changed or they have turned a new leaf, as they say.
Yeah.
And I think about what does it mean to try to right that wrong? Can you ever right that wrong? And what does it mean for the people that were your victims?
Yeah.
What do they have to forgive you?
Oh, man. Yeah. That definitely comes through in the book. You did a fascinating job with that, with all of the characters, but that one in particular was just unpredictable right down to the last. And yeah, I feel like you really hit the emotional root of that idea. Exactly what you're talking about. People can, you can forgive, but do you have to forgive someone just because they're trying to make amends? And I think you do a great job in the Bone Shard War in particular of kind of showing multiple sides of that argument where you can empathize with characters, you can understand them, but some characters are going to try to make amends and others are maybe too far gone to, but they're still people.
Yeah.
So, okay. Moving away from the Drowning Empire, I want to ask you just a little bit about what you're working on now. Is The Gods Below, is that the working title? Are we allowed to say the working title?
Yes, that is the working title for the series. We have not agreed on a title for the first book yet, but I am, after discarding about 60,000 words, I am now, because like I said, I am trying to accept this as part of my process. I'm not quite gone to acceptance yet, but now I'm about halfway through my new draft, which I suppose the first one was a 0 draft. So perhaps this is the first draft. I don't know the correct numerical
whatever keeps it organized on your computer.
Right. Oh, well, the other one's in trash. So, but yeah, I'm very excited about it. I'm very excited to be playing in a new world with new characters. Again, I am just throwing a bunch of ideas in there that I find really fun and interesting. Like, I've always been fascinated by the idea of a hollow world, although I know scientifically that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But I'm like, you know what? It's fantasy. There's magic. So let's do this. So basically that's the reason why it's called The Gods Below, because the gods actually live in that hollow in the center of the earth.
Oh, cool.
And that's where magic is concentrated. So I also have this concept where magic is in the air, and the concentration gets heavier and heavier the deeper you go into the earth. And it is unfortunately toxic to most people. So there's that.
That's intriguing.
So basically so the world starts out where it's basically undergone this magical apocalypse. So it's an apocalyptic kind of landscape. The world has been shattered into different realms, and these realms are one by one being restored in quotations, by a god who has made a bargain with a mortal who said, hey, we really need you guys to fix things up here. And it centers around 2 sisters who have been separated by a cataclysmic event at the beginning of the book. And they're trying to find their way back to one another. There are obviously more characters than that, because it's me. I write epic fantasy. So those are that's where the story is centering around these 2 sisters trying to find their way back to one another. There is a woman who is trying to restore her family's name. There is a man who is leading an expedition down to that center of the earth. Yes. And then there's a viewpoint that takes place in the past and kind of shows you a little bit about how the world came to be the way that it is. So, and whether there is a connection between that and the present day stuff, I will leave that up to the reader.
Cool.
So that's kind of like
cool.
the quick summary. Oh, I'm glad. Like sometimes I get so close to these things, I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know if I'm like doing anything interesting at this point. But yeah. I am excited about the characters. I'm excited about the world. So
cool. I feel like once you see authors do more than one series, you can kind of see through lines in their work. So it's kind of fascinating to me that like interesting worlds, because, you know, world building starts in a different place for everyone. But like, it seems like you have consistently had some cool like geography things, because the Drowning Empire, those are obviously, you know, drifting islands. The geology of those islands is a central part of the series. So it's really interesting and exciting to see that crop back up in your new project too.
Well, to me, if I'm going to build a fantasy world, why not get a little bit weird, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no reason it should just be like Earth, but everyone's got funny hats.
I mean, not to say that there's anything wrong with that. I love, you know, the fantasy that takes place in a very parallel world to our own. I just like to build very strange worlds. That's all.
Well, it seems like the people who like to read your work like to read those worlds too. So clearly something is working. So just along those lines, we talked a little bit before about book ones and how that was a particular code you had cracked, so to speak. Is there anything from like crafting a trilogy that you are thinking about more actively as you go into your next series that you've learned from doing the Drowning Empire?
Yeah. So I have more of an idea of what happens in book 2 and book 3 and how that overall arc comes together. I had written out quick summaries on book 2 and book 3 for my first series. So I had an idea of how that kind of came together, but I think the moving pieces of the characters, I didn't really have as much of an idea. I had kind of like the overall broad stroke. So for this one, I kind of outlined a little bit more about, okay, what happens to these characters through books 2 and books 3? Like what is their overall character arc and how does that happen? So I'm hoping that this saves me a little bit more trouble. Like I said, I had a lot of practice writing book 1. So I'm hoping now with more practice of writing book 2 and book 3 that this will go smoother, but who knows? I mean, every book is different, which is a little bit unfortunate in the sense that you're always feeling like you're starting over.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems like that feeling doesn't ever entirely go away. I was reading an essay from Kate Elliott.
Experience, yeah.
Yeah. And she was mentioning this she's been writing books for decades, and every single time she starts one, there's this question of, did I forget how to do this? Is this going to be any good?
Yeah. I don't know if that's cursed knowledge or not. Sometimes I feel like it's cursed knowledge, but
like once you know it, you can't unknow it type knowledge.
Yeah. It's just, well, I know it's always going to be this hard instead of that, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed feeling of, wow, I'm going to get better and better at this, and it's going to be easier every time.
Yeah. Well, the evidence, I would say, like, even if it doesn't feel like it, the books probably speak for themselves, that there is still, you know, a journey there that the writer is going on. And certainly with your books, I think looking from the Bone Shard Daughter to now where the series ended, there's definitely just an immense feeling of bringing together all these huge elements. I can't imagine how much planning it took. So just excited.
It took a lot. I am very, very happy that some of those secrets that I've been holding on to since book 1 are now going to be revealed. I think that's really fun.
Yeah, it's going to be cool when readers start accosting you for, you know, making these huge bittersweet decisions here at the 11th hour. But so I'm going to end with a couple of just easy rapid fire questions. Ready?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
What is the last book and the last TV show that you really loved?
Oh gosh. Last TV show that I really loved, that's an easy one. That's Andor. I
Oh,
scream at
nice.
everybody about it.
It was so
And it's
good.
funny because when I saw it was coming out, I thought to myself, well, oh, like another Star Wars show. Like,
Yep.
I don't know if I'm going to be into it. And I started watching it and I was just entranced because it's so much better than it has any right to be. Every episode is just
Absolutely.
fantastic writing. I recommend it to everybody. Last book that I read that I really loved. I've been reading a lot of books. I'm trying to remember what is the last one that I finished that I really loved. I think I'm just going to throw out there The Adventures of Amina El Sarafi
Oh,
by
good
Shannon
choice.
Chakraborty. Oh gosh, I would just, and I'm throwing it out there because I was just raving about it to my husband the other day about how it's got these tropes that you really love. It's got that one last job kind of trope where these middle-aged characters are just kind of thrown back into the fray where they may or may not want to be. But it's also got a character at its center who is a mother, and she's also trying to balance that with wanting that glory and wondering if she should even want it. So that's an extremely relatable theme for me. So
Yeah.
I just devoured that book. It's not just thematically wonderful. It is highly entertaining.
Oh, cool. That is high praise. And that one is out too right now. The Adventures of Amina Al Sarafi was the name, right?
Yes, 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 it's
Um,
out.
yeah, definitely worth checking out if you're watching this video because you're into this type of epic fantasy. That one's been on my reading list. I haven't gotten to it quite yet though.
Oh
Um,
gosh, it is so fun.
cool. Okay, so if you could choose any animal companion from another fantasy or sci-fi series, so no
Oh.
Mephi allowed, what one would you choose? And it doesn't need to be like it can be a fantastical animal, obviously. So it doesn't need to be it can
Mm-hmm.
be a creature of some
Oh,
sort too.
I want one of the dragons from Pern. I want to go
Nice.
fly around and have an amazing dragon. Yes, that I can speak to telepathically and who loves me. Yes.
That's a great choice. Okay, so I wasn't planning on this, but now I need to ask it because I'm literally sitting like right next to all my Pern books right here, just off camera. Do you have a favorite Pern book?
Oh God, yes I do. It's oh gosh, what is I'm trying to like is it Dragon Song? Is that the name with the first like mentally book
Yes. Yeah, Dragon
with
Song.
her fire lizards? Oh my God. I related so hard to that as a kid because I wanted to get into the arts and everything. And my parents were very
Yeah.
like science, math. And she's like this very lonely kid. And it's kind of sad. And I was a very lonely kid and I was bullied and everything. And then she gets these like fire lizards and it's just like the best. And she gets to have her dreams come true. I mean, you can't ask for more than that. It's just
Yeah.
wish fulfillment at its best. It's amazing.
Yeah, totally. Totally. The trilogy of Meneley books are so good. Cool.
They are. They are.
All right. Last question. Where can people find your work if they want to read more of your stuff?
I mean, it's it's available at like all like the bookstore areas and everything. Yeah.
I
I'm
mean more
online
online.
too. Yeah. Oh, online. Yeah. I'm online on Twitter, Instagram. Sadly, I am also now on TikTok. It's at Andrea G. Stewart for all of those. And then my website is AndreaGStewart.com. So yeah, I'm trying to do the TikTok thing, but it's makes me feel old, definitely. Yeah.
I definitely relate to that. I open it and I just want to shout at people to get off my lawn. So I very much feel that.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. So Andrea, thank you so much for taking time. Again, it's your release day, so really appreciate you making the time to talk about the Bone Shard War and your work.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
It was a pleasure. So for all of you listening, don't forget to like and subscribe for more interviews like this. Check us out at winteriscoming.net, where we write about fantasy and science fiction, books, TV shows, and movies pretty much every day of the week. And for now, we're signing off. Take care.